Welcome back to the Take Me Higher chats. I'm Justin Meredith.
I'm Ash Simmons.
We've got a really important video today, actually, and it's about being able to adapt and overcome. We're going to talk a little bit about some military environments where that's important, but also how that's applicable to personal life and corporate life. But before we get into it, we'd really love it if you could like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It actually means an awful lot, and we're getting our word out there. So please interact with what we're doing. Ash, adapt and overcome. A big part of your military career must have revolved around having plans, but also being able to pivot when the time was right.
Yeah, 100%. You look at, I guess, the framework of, and a very broad and generalised framework that the military conducts missions, and that could be very small mission or quite a large, ongoing, day by day, week by week, year by year mission.
Yeah.
But everything is planned, and that includes planning for emergencies and when things go wrong, and that is your adapt and overcome. Sometimes you can plan for scenarios, and sometimes things just come out of the blue that you would have never even considered, and you have to almost, on that, within seconds in times, make a decision that's often without the most information or an amount of information that you'd really like. You have to be able to make an educated guess almost on what's the safest and what's going to be the best outcome for this situation. And things always go wrong.
Yeah. Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
Exactly right. And for the military guys out there that are listening, they'll all laugh when I talk about comms or communications. Because everything you do, whether it's my background in the marine environment or in the dust of Afghanistan or wherever you're operating, comms are always an issue, whether it's too far, line of sight, there's a mountain in the way. So there's just the gremlins get into the comms and it always fails.
Right.
So we have, I guess, basically a standing emergency plan for that, which is PACE. So primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency, and that's planning to adapt and overcome before it even happens.
Yeah, right.
So you're planning for the worst, hoping for the best, effectively.
Yeah.
So you look at that PACE example. So your primary, you'd always have a secure radio comms on yourself. You'd also have likely a comms person with you. So there's two primary comms, one internal to team and one external to reach out and up. So if they fail, you look at alternate. So you'll often have a secondary form of comms. Your comms number will generally have two sets. So if one fails, one has a meltdown, flat batteries, anything can go on. Boom, they'll flick to their secondary, you're good, you can go on. Primary and alternate fail, then you've got your contingency. That may be an unsecured set of communications, which means that your enemy may be able to pick up and track and listen to what's going on. Definitely not ideal, but it's better than not having any communications at all. So your team is then separated and uninformed. So you might have to go to an unsecure set of communications. If and when that fails, you then look at emergency, and kind of your emergency is often
setting a flare into the sky.
It could very well be that.
Right.
That could be the initiation of an attack, or it could say, objective secured or mission complete. That could mean a million different things, and it's a great example. It could be just voice, i.e., if we're close enough we can talk, we can whisper, or if we're sort of separated by distance, just screaming. Yep, everyone's going to know that you're yelling about something. You might have code words that you can use. So again, you can use that level of security, but you may not. The situation may not allow for it. You may have just a random garbage radio that's completely unsecured, that may have a small range that you just happen to have, or even a mobile phone. And let's be real, when does a mobile phone fail? Not very often.
Yeah.
When do military grade comms fail? All the time.
Often.
All the time. So that's an example of planning to adapt and overcome. I'll talk a little bit later on how you can adapt and overcome on the fly.
Okay, all right. It's amazing. I always get goosebumps when you talk about these military environments, because it happens on such a chronic period when you're in the corporate world. Things can start to fail, but it's never life and death. But when you are talking about this, you're in the dust of Afghanistan and everything goes wrong, there's real consequences there.
And they're very dynamic situations.
Have you had any situations in your military life where you've had to sort of almost pivot on a sixpence?
Look, that yes is the straight answer. Expanding out on that all the time. When you operate in those sort of areas, whether it's just the environment can change. You could start the day and it could be blue skies and fine. You go out on a diving mission and the weather can turn, it can be raining, the winds can get up, the surf gets up, and that completely changes everything.
Yeah.
One example that I think of off the top of my head is whilst I was in Afghanistan, we were waiting for a helicopter to come and pick us up and take us out on a job. That's, sort of a daily occurrence. There's nothing too special about that. Flights often sort of get delayed or get turned off, or there may be something more critical. There may be an event that's happened and someone's injured. So the helos will be diverted to go and respond to that, and our mission would be deprioritised, or vice versa. It happens all the time with air assets. The one specific time that I'm talking about, we were ready to go out for a job and it was due for, let's say, 9 in the morning. It was relatively early, timing's irrelevant. And we're on the flight line, ready to go, and got told helo had been turned off for whatever reason. Okay, so we trundled back to our room, sort of took our kit off, chilled out a little bit. Guess what? Helo's coming again, and it's coming now. Righto, everyone gets dressed. Surprise, it's been turned off again. So this sort of went back and forth 2 or 3 times. Quite frustrating because each time you're adapting and overcoming to the situation. All right, it's not coming. Let's turn focus to whatever the work needs to be done within the base, because we're not going out on a job anymore. Just as you start doing that, and that looks like cleaning weapons, taking apart explosive tools, things that you take a weapon apart, when you're proficient, you can put it back together quite quickly, like you're talking about within 30 seconds. But you have to do those sort of jobs properly, because if you don't put a firing pin in and you get into a situation where you have to fire your weapon, it clicks and nothing happens.
Yeah.
So again, adapting and overcoming in seconds. Quick, get that gun back together, get dressed, and go and get on the helo. And that's exactly what happened. We didn't get notified till the helo was on the ground.
Wow.
And helos are a great target for enemies.
Very vulnerable piece of kit.
That's right, and they're at their most vulnerable when they're on the ground.
Yeah, right.
They're built to be in the air, and they're quite agile when they're in the air, and they have ways of avoiding gunfire, missiles, that sort of stuff. When they're sitting on the ground, you can see the pilots get a bit edgy. So when they're there, they want you getting on or getting off as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Whether you're within a base or not, they're still a target. So we got told when it was on the ground. We'd had weapons apart, packs were off, we were half in uniform, boots were off. So righto boys, get there in whatever means possible. So weapons back together, all the gear that you are going to need is an expectation that you turn up with that. I rocked up with sort of a gun belt over my shoulder with pistol in, rifle over the shoulder, pack on over one shoulder, my boots sort of half on, body armor slung over one. That was me adapting and overcoming, and that was our team. We got onto the helo. We were safe. We knew we could get the job done.
Yeah.
And once we were seated in and sort of done, you can sort of do your laces up, make sure your body armor's on, take a quick stock. Yes, I've got, whether it's medical equipment or enough magazines for the job. It's too late then, but you still go around and check so you know that when you land on that job, okay, I'm short this. Can we disperse or reorg with the team and say, hey, can I have a couple of your magazines or whatever that looks like? You're continually adapting and overcoming to that evolving situation.
Amazing. Yeah. I think as you're sort of saying it, you're kind of, pardon the pun, but you are building the airplane in the sky as you go,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I know, it's got the aviation sort of theme there, but it's true, like you're taking as much as you can into that environment and then working on the fly.
Yeah, I think the message for adapt and overcome is that things are always going to go wrong. The best laid plans often fail.
Yeah.
So you need to have some forethought, and you don't even have to express it formally. You can go, okay, well, what if this happens? Okay, I can pivot here, or what if my team member does something? Okay, I can move here to assist them.
Yeah.
There's that constant thought of what ifs.
And look, I think I've seen it a lot in my corporate life. It's not quite as acute, like I said, and not quite sort of confronting as you're talking about there, but oftentimes a strategy will change. Like you're about to bring a drug to market, it doesn't get reimbursed. You're about to pick a new partner to work with and they fold, or they change the scope of work to the point that it's unworkable anymore. And so a lot of the times that I've seen this, you're absolutely right. And that's hard for me because I'm an optimist, right? I always think the best is going to happen, but and sometimes it does, but a lot of time it doesn't. And I think that's when you've got to be able to go, okay, we're good here.
Yeah.
And I got a few tips for that, like a few things that I think have really worked for me. So having a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. Okay, I see a lot of people, especially in business, and I don't know if it happens much in military, so you'll have to tell me, but a lot of people are like, nope, this is the way we do things, this is the way we've always done things, and we're just going to keep going down that line. I don't know if it's ego or sheer bloody mindedness, but it will trip you up.
Yeah, we always need to be evolving.
You do, absolutely, and you need to be able to, and I think this is the next step. Be ready to pivot. And that comes into that growth mindset. Be ready to say, hey, do you know what? I can see this isn't quite going how we want it to. We've got to have this contingency. We've got to have something else lined up so that if that starts to get stuck in the mud, bang, you can bolt in with the next thing. Because in business, time is money.
Yeah, literally. Yeah,
it really is. And you've got to make sure that you're hitting your target. You're getting you're giving your shareholders what they need, or if it's, big corporate, potentially sometimes what the big organization kind of overarching wants back off you as well. So be ready to pivot. I think dropping the ego, and, I don't know if you found this in military environments, and I'm not setting you up for anything here, but I think in corporate, I think sometimes the higher you get, the more you think you've got complete control of everything. But actually, if you drop your ego, you can get a lot more done.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ego's everywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's corporate, sport, military, like that. People don't change. You can take that person from one setting and put them into another, and they won't change. That ego will still be there. That's a very, I think, internalized and individual issue that they need to really work on themselves. It does interest me to see that the way that you talk about corporate having that inability to sort of be agile, and you look at the military, whilst we're trained very much to be agile, there's a lot of procedures in place that
bureaucracy,
exactly right, that stagnate that ability to evolve. So I think that's something, and I won't just say military, I would say government, and probably corporate too.
Yeah.
We're getting into the world now where you look at simple work health and safety. It almost stagnates the ability to get the job done because there's a lot of rules and regulations in place that limit that job getting done as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as I think about it, like in corporate, it's generally the bigger companies that find it harder to adapt and overcome. It's like trying to turn the Titanic, as opposed to this nimble little kind of like flip around startups. And I suppose that's the same for sort of smaller operational units that need to think on the fly, as opposed to big kind of, big parts of the military. Look at me showing off my ability. Yeah. I know everything about the military.
What you allude to there is you look at the smaller units being generally quite specialised.
Yeah.
And they often do have a bit more freedom to execute a task or a mission. Whereas you look at larger moving bodies of people, equipment, assets, it is quite difficult to allow that to change. So I think that's what you're alluding to in that sort of business world, and very much in the military world.
Yeah, okay. Look, there's two other things that I think, like I've always, like as we reflected before this conversation, I think you have to constantly be looking for patterns. I think, things, if you're not dialed into the environment around you and all the little data points, you don't become paranoid, but start to look at, hey, there's something going on here. We're seeing a few things, and we've seen it a couple of times with our business where there's a trend happening. And it might only be 2 or 3 times that something happens, but you have to click onto that really quickly, right? You can't be naive to it.
And as you say that, I really enjoy these conversations because you'll say something and it'll cue something from my experience. And you say patterns. The way that we talk in the military sort of terminology is patterns of life.
Right.
So if you were, again, we'll go back to an Afghanistan example. If we're moving into a village that we're going to conduct an operation in, on or around, you will observe the patterns of life, the comings and goings, what's happening. You'll generally know after spending an amount of time in a place, okay, everything's normal here. Yeah. It's a normal pattern of life. You go into the supermarket or wherever it is, you walk out the front, you're like, oh, something's different today. Patterns of life are off. that's your cue to go, all right, how am I going to adapt and overcome to this situation
Yeah.
because something is different.
Yeah.
I might not know what it is, but I have to quickly figure it out and then adapt to that situation.
Yeah.
So you say patterns, I say patterns of life, but it effectively means the same thing.
And it's interesting. They're not always captured in real data points,
they're
right?
not.
They are subjective things that you're talking about, and
Yeah.
you kind of have to trust your gut.
Yes.
And use your gut. Don't just kind of get too bogged down in what you're doing. Have this sort of like single focus. Without sort of over quoting Jocko here, you have to sometimes be looking up and out instead of down and in. Because if you're down and in all the time, you could get something perfect, but by the time it comes to market, it's not fit for purpose.
Yeah. And you've effectively failed your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings me to my final point, which is that emerging strategy. Constantly be looking at, is this working? Be critical. And a lot of people, it can be a bit of a head mess sometimes. Nearly swore. Don't like swearing on this, do we? How do I say this? You have to be self-critical sometimes. Am I doing the right thing? Am I putting my efforts exactly where they need to be? And if you're not, then you've got to switch it out. You've got to change it. Focus on the main thing. And if something was the main thing a week ago, it might not be the main thing moving forward because things change. So refocus regularly.
Yeah, and that's the piece on, I guess, that individual being adaptable and being able to overcome what's placed in front of them. You touched on ego before, and I won't talk about it too much, but it can be a commander, a boss, a manager, a supervisor, whatever the appropriate title is for that person. They may have an amazing plan or what they think is an amazing plan, and they will say, no, that will be executed to the final full stop. That is the way it will be done.
Yeah.
And often they don't want it changed when the environment, the situation is changing because they're so involved and invested in what they've done.
I know it well.
And that individual needs to go, wow, I need to adapt. Your plan is still amazing. It's probably even better because you've shown your flexibility and your adaptability to go, oh, that's not going to work for this situation. Quick, let's change and pivot, and boom. Now we've been able to bring that product to market.
Yeah.
Slightly different. It might be a different color because that's what the market says and suggests that it needs, or it might be a mission that you might not have achieved because of weather change or something like that.
Exactly.
It might even be the fact that you go, whoa, let's pull the pin on it and let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or let's deliver in 6 months' time.
Absolutely. Put it on freeze. And
Yeah.
we call that an emerging strategy. And I think that it is vital to have that growth mindset, which we're coming full circle back to now, to sort of say, you know what, if it doesn't happen, it's just my ego should not come into this.
Correct.
Look, we've talked a lot about this. I'm really impressed with kind of your military examples and also the transferability into corporate. So
Yeah, it's nice. There is definitely layers that relate to both sort of areas of our experience.
Excellent.